Heads of state of South America arrived in Brasilia for the meeting of South American presidents, convened by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and this is the first of its kind in nearly a decade. The Russian Ministry of Defense said that 8 drones launched in the direction of Moscow were neutralized and accused Ukraine of the attack. In India, at least 10 people were killed and 55 others were injured when a bus carrying Hindu pilgrims fell into a gorge near Jammu city in the northern state of Punjab. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. South American leaders, including the presidents of Argentina, Bolivia, and Venezuela, arrived in Brasilia on Tuesday for the meeting of South American presidents, convened by the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. In this year's meeting, heads of state from Argentina, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Paraguay, Suriname, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Brazil are due to attend the gathering in Brasilia, the first of its kind in nearly a decade. First established 15 years ago in Brazil's capital during the second presidential term of the President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, is a regional bloc sought to integrate the 12 South American nations culturally, socially, politically, and economically.
The first official meeting of the BRICS in which it will participate after 8 years, and there are several proposals from other countries that want to join the BRICS. We are going to discuss it because it does not depend on the will of Brazil. It depends on the will of all of us. We are going to discuss if there is an official request. This request will be officially taken to the BRICS, and we will decide there. And if you ask me, I am in favor of it.
From Brazil, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, expressed his country's willingness to join the BRICS group in order to contribute to the construction of a new world architecture.
Our great and powerful friend Saudi Arabia is taking steps to join the BRICS Bank. Can you imagine? And if you ask us in Venezuela, do you aspire one day to be accepted in the BRICS? Venezuela says yes. We would like to be part of the BRICS in a modest way. To be part of the BRICS and to accompany the construction of this new architecture, of this new world geopolitics, of this new world that is already being born.
Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said he dreams of a common currency for doing business between countries and hopes to be able to discuss the issue during the meeting with the South American presidents.
I dream that we will have a currency between our countries so that we can do business without relying on the US dollar. Even because the dollar only has the dollar, and that country does what it wants with the dollar. And it is not possible that we do not have more freedom to do business. I dream that BRICS can have a currency like the European Union built the euro, so I think we have to move forward.
And precisely now we go live to Brazil as the heads of states of South American nations attend this meeting, gathered and also convened by the President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Let's see. Now we have these live images from the Planalto Palace as heads of state and also representatives of different South American nations attend this gathering. As we see, the president of Guyana arrived at the Planalto Palace. Also, he's making his entrance to attend this gathering, this meeting of South American nations. As also, Guyana is one of the main partners of South American regional relations and also is one of the nations that has common borders with Brazil and Venezuela at the same time. Irfan Ali, the president of this nation of Guyana, made his entrance to the Planalto Palace where the heads of state of South American nations are going to attend this gathering. Let's see some context. Let's see some data regarding this gathering, this meeting. The presidents of South American nations, of 11 South American nations, and the representative of Peru are going to attend this meeting. In this case, the representative of Peru is the president of the Congress, Alberto Darola, who is going to fill in for Dina Boluarte, the head of state, because she has not a vice president. She has not a second in office, so she cannot leave the nation, and also she doesn't have the permission of the Congress to leave the country. In this case, the other 11 nations are going to send their heads of state and the top high officials. In any case, they're going to be here to discuss regional issues. In the main topics of this agenda, is going to be economic cooperation, the rejoining of UNASUR, or maybe the establishment of a new regional bloc, a new regional organization that can gather all the regions, all the nations, and also can make a bloc that, in the dream and in the words of the president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, is going to be able to emulate the African Union or maybe the European Union. His dream, his premise, his foundation for this gathering is to consolidate a regional bloc that is able to trade among them, to cope with inflation, to can maybe restart some of the main cooperation agreements they had in terms of health, in terms of education, agriculture, economy, energy, and in terms also of technology, because let's remember, South America has a great potential to exploit some resources, and also with Bolivia with the lithium reserves and Peru with lithium reserves. South America is becoming one of the main niches of these resources, of these possibilities to develop technology, to develop batteries, to develop the main tools for the future technologies and for the present technologies also. Now, let's remember, this is the first time that many of these presidents are going to attend a meeting of this kind. In a decade, many of them had been changing terms, have been going in and out of office, and in this case, many of them are going to represent their countries for the first time in Brazil in a decade. In the case of Venezuela, as we know, during the terms of several right-wing presidents, such as Mario Abdo Benítez, such as Luis Lacalle Pou, and such as the former president of Brazil itself, Jair Bolsonaro, Venezuela was estranged from the regional blocs, from the regional gatherings, but in this case, this meeting marks Venezuela's return to the regional integration mechanisms. This is one of the main gatherings, and this is a milestone, not just for Venezuela, but for the region. The presidents are going also to face this shift of power, this shift of political guidelines that had been reigning in the region. Because now we are going to see the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, who is a progressive president. We are going to see President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil, who is more concerned about the social issues of his country and the poor of his country. And also he's more concerned about the integration, the solidarity, the ways to make Latin America to walk as one. We're going to see Socialist President Nicolás Maduro Moros, who is also one of the main heads of state in terms of the leftist guidelines, and also he's one of the main progressive presidents in Latin America in terms of politics. And also we are going to see attending the gathering President, as I was saying, Lula da Silva, President Maduro, we have President Gabriel Boric, but also it's going to be a diversity of thinking, a diversity of ideology, a diversity of maybe the economic thinking and models to impose in any country. Because we're going to see also President of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, who is a right-wing lead president, and also he is a neoliberal, a banker, a trader. He's more concerned about finances, and who is also facing an one-of-a-kind situation, because Guillermo Lasso is not the president of Ecuador in law. He's the president of Ecuador in fact, because of the impeachment he was facing, and he dissolved the Congress of that South American nation. We're going to see also Mario Abdo Benítez, who is going to fill in for Santiago Peña, who is going to assume office in August this year. we're going to see also Luis Lacalle Pou, that he had several statements and several positions regarding Venezuela, regarding Cuba, and regarding other progressive regional governments. And that is going to be an interesting gathering. They are going to discuss the potential of the region, and in any case, how to move forward despite this diversity, despite their differences, despite this mosaic that is Latin America right now. Now we are going to see other presidents that are arriving to the Planalto Palace. We can see that there is a guard of honor, the military in their customs, in their ways to receive these heads of state, these presidents that are going to attend the gathering and the summon called by the president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. This is one of the main promises, the main campaign promises of Lula, that he is fulfilling now, 1 year later of assuming power, of taking power, and is to call together Latin America, is to enhance his relationships with other nations, and is going to promote unity, to promote cooperation above all the differences and above all the ways that every president has. Now we see the head of state of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso. Let's remember some data, some information we were offering regarding Guillermo Lasso. Guillermo Lasso has been facing several ups and downs during his term as the head of state of Ecuador. He has facing violence. He was facing nationwide protests. He was facing also the discontent of several sectors. He imposed several states of emergency to militarize his nation. And he was faced with protests because of the social sectors, the workers, the students, and the indigenous people. But Guillermo Lasso, as a resource, as a last-minute resource, dissolved his Congress, dissolved the legislative branch of his government, the counterpart of the executive in Ecuador, because they were impeaching him. They were conducting an impeachment trial against him. So this was his silver line. This was his last resource to stay in power for more time. Now, Guillermo Lasso attends this meeting, this gathering, as the head of state of Ecuador, but he's going to expect to be out of office in 2024, as his country is now convoking to snap elections, after the dissolution of the Congress, after he called the resource named or dubbed cross death. That is the dissolution of the Congress, and immediately at the moment, at the second, the government of a nation is also dissolved without a Congress, and the head of state is calling for this resource. Now Guillermo Lasso is attending with his entourage. He's attending this meeting, and also he's making his entrance to the Planalto Palace. Let's recall some things also in this moment. The Planalto Palace is one of the main venues in Brasilia, is the seat of the government, is the place where the president and also the Congress have their gatherings, have their meetings, and this is the place where the head of state of Brazil emits all his powers and sits, finally, that's bottom line, where does this venue. But in January 2022, 2023, after taking power, the assumption of power, the inauguration of the president Luis Inácio Lula da Silva for his third term. Let's remember this was one of the main venues that was assaulted and took over by the protesters and the supporters of the former president Jair Bolsonaro, who were making a copycat. They were mirroring the assault of the capital of the U.S. after the election of Joe Biden as the president of that nation. So this is one of the main data, it's not a fun fact, but maybe it's an interesting fact about this venue. This venue was assaulted. This venue was took over. This venue saw the disruption of the democracy in Brazil, and now is seeing the reunion, the gathering, the cooperation of Latin American leaders and also of Latin American heads of state. Another president is arriving at the Planalto Palace, the president of Paraguay. In this case, let's see the president of Paraguay, who is Mario Abdo Benítez. The president of Paraguay, Mario Abdo Benítez, who is the outgoing president, because that nation held nationwide and general elections that saw Mario Abdo Benitez going out of office and saw the entrance in power, the assuming of power of Santiago Peña, who is a young economist, who is a neoliberal leader, but has another approach to the progressive leaders of the nation. Mario Abdo Benitez is still sitting in power, as he is still the head of state of this South American nation, and he's going to be as the president, acting as president, until August 15th. That is going to be the day of the inauguration of Santiago Peña as the new head of state of that nation. Now we can see that Mario Abdo Benitez, as the other heads of state, is received by the Guard of Honor at the Planalto Palace, and also by the high and top officials of Brazil, and he's making his entrance. All of these heads of state, they are arriving as part of the protocol, as part of the event agenda, and they are going to be holding a private gathering, because this is not going to be an open gathering, an open discussion. This is going to be a closed-door gathering convoked by the President, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, and they are going to discuss these main issues, these main topics for the region. Let's remember, this is not, and I'm stressing the not, this is not a UNASUR gathering. This is a gathering of South American nations. This is a way to enhance and to find a new mechanism of integration, because this is a new future. This is not the same Latin America. This is not the same systems. This is not the same region as it was when UNASUR was founded, when UNASUR was created. UNASUR had to see the fallout of several members that went away, that went estranged because of ideological issues and ideological differences with its main base and its main representatives. In this case, this is a new gathering that is trying to reinforce the possibilities of the region, the potential of the region, and also to see a new reality that is marked by new trade ways, by maybe the digital currencies, by the conflict in Ukraine, that is also one of the main political events and the political facts, historical facts, that is going to be affecting not only that region, Eurasia, but also Africa and mainly Latin America. Let's remember, Brazil is one of the main trade partners of Russia in terms of agriculture and fertilizers. So the military operation in Ukraine is affecting directly Brazil's economy, and is affecting directly also, as in the domino effect, all the South American economies, all the South American nations. Maybe one of the main nations that is affected is not only Brazil, but also Colombia. Okay, one of these closest neighbors that also exports agricultural tools, agricultural elements like seeds, like fertilizers and others. Now, as we see, the Guard of Honor is standing still, is waiting for another head of state to arrive. Let's remember, or let's recall some of the main aspects of this gathering. Let's recall. So there are going to be 12 representatives of the 12 South American nations that comprehend this region. In any case, there are going to be 11 heads of state and just one representative for Peru. That is going to be the president of the Congress of Peru, Alberto Tarola. He's going to fill in, as we were saying, for Dina Boluarte. Dina Boluarte is the appointed president of Peru. She took office after the Congress removed Pedro Castillo from office and held him prisoner, held him captive at Lima, Peru, and she is appointed by the Congress to be the head of state until the term of office concludes of the former president Pedro Castillo. But she is the appointed president. She has no vice president, so by law in Peru she can't go out of the country. She can't move out of the national borders. So her, the president of her Congress, the president of the Congress of the nation, Alberto Tarola, is going to attend for her this gathering, this meeting. Peru, from a politics of integration and from a politic of solidarity with some nations in the south of America, conducted by Pedro Castillo. Let's remember that Pedro Castillo wanted to restore relationships with Venezuela, and he showed willingness to cooperate with other neighbors such as Colombia, such as Bolivia, and such as Argentina. Let's remember and let's recall that those policies went from intending to be solidarity or intending to be cooperation or cooperative, and they move away to the other pole with Dina Boluarte. And now she is estranged from Venezuela. She broke ties with other nations, and mainly with one of the Central American nations that is also calling for gatherings like this and solidarity like this, that's Mexico. Now, Dina Boluarte has a hostile policy towards Mexico and towards its president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Now let's talk about possibilities. Let's talk about possibilities. Yesterday, in their private meeting and then in their joint press conference to the public, the president of Brazil, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, and the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, they were talking about their dream, their intentions, their projections of a common currency to trade in the region. Let's recall that that could raise possibilities, that could raise economic development for the region, because not to use the American dollar, the US dollar, not to use the euro, but to use, for example, a common currency for Latin America will enhance regional economies, will enhance the trade with Caribbean nations, will enhance the power for this region to trade with others like the African Union or maybe Eurasia or maybe the US. This would undermine and will bring down the trading power of the dollar and also the economic power and hegemony of the US dollar, and will bring forward the resources of Latin America. We will be bringing forward the power in agriculture of Brazil, the power in oil of Venezuela, the power in maybe tourism and other resources of Colombia. Let's think about it, because that could be a very positive shift for the Caribbean. That could be a very positive shift for South America, and why not for the world. Other of the topics that those both heads of state they discussed yesterday, we are referring to Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moros, who is visiting Brazil since Sunday night, and the President of Brazil, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. They were discussing also the two main topics: the possible entrance of Venezuela to the BRICS group, and also the sanctions imposed on Venezuela by the West and by the US. Lula was saying that he is favorable, that he is open, that he is willing for the integration of Venezuela to the BRICS community, the BRICS group. There are Russia, India, there is Brazil also, and there is Argentina. There are several nations that also are composing this bloc, this group. There is also South Africa. Those are emerging economies that could lead the world in some point, and that have the power to shift the trade, to shift the markets, and to shift the economies. Now, the entrance of Venezuela, let's recall, they were saying there are so many applications. Over 30 nations are applying to enter BRICS. And this is a way to face other regional blocs or other economic blocs and military blocs like the G7. Okay, is a way to confront the hegemony and the interference of other hegemonic nations and more potent nations and the ruling in the world. And now the president, the head of state of Chile, Gabriel Boric, he's making his entrance. He's coming in to attend this gathering of South American nations. This is an interesting head of state to invite, and also this is an interesting guest to have in Brazil right now. Let's remember, or let's recall, Boric is a former student, a former protesting student. In his years prior to his office, to his term in office, he was a social leader, a student leader, and he became president after one of the main social crises and social outbursts in Chile. We can recall the last quarter of 2019. And I beg your pardon if I'm making a mistake there, but I think from October or from November of 2019, the students in Chile, they were rising up against the government policies of Sebastián Piñera. And the indigenous Mapuche communities, they were also rising up against Piñera, against his neoliberal policies that were putting aside the interest of the lower social sectors. And now we see a president that is not only coming from those sectors, but that is also a young president, because Gabriel Boric is under 40 years of age. Okay, he's a really, really young president with fresh ideas, but he has not taken the lead towards the left. He remains in some center leading to the left, maybe presidency. He is trying to bring forward a new constitution in Chile that is going to be one of the main achievements of the protesting movement. And he's also trying to integrate some of the indigenous groups and social groups in his policies. Nonetheless, he had failed to bring forward his own project of constitution, and now the right-wing groups are bringing forward theirs. But that is a way to enhance democracy, to listen to all the voices and to give participation to all the sectors. Chile, that we know, is one of the South American nations that faced a dictatorship in their history, in their ways, and also that left a mark. Okay, that left maybe a bruise in their history, in their collective memory, and now they want to move out from that stage, move out and move on from that period of times and from the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. And now that the presidents are entering, that the presidents are arriving, let's recall the list of the main presidents that are going to be here. Attending the gathering, and he already arrived, is the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, the president of Paraguay, Mario Abdo Benítez, also the president of Guyana, Irfan Ali, and the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric. Those are the presidents attending this gathering that already have arrived to the Planalto Palace in Brasilia to attend this gathering of South American nations summoned and convoked by the president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. And other presidents must make the entrance, must be here attending this gathering and attending to the discussions, the possible discussions of this private gathering. We are expecting also the president of Argentina, Alberto Fernández, that is going to conclude his term in office also, and he appealed to not be re-elected. He announced he's not going to run for re-election in the South American country. But he has been one of the progressive presidents of this nation, with Peronism behind his back also and over his shoulders. That is a legacy that he cannot betray, that is a heavy patrimony and inheritance he has in his politics. And Argentina is facing a hardship or a hard economic situation with inflation, with the IMF doing deals, with the distorted policies of Macrismo, and with several smear campaigns and several undermining campaigns against the government of Alberto Fernández, and especially the attempts against the Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner that last year in September suffered an homicide attempt against her. In any case, Alberto Fernández is one of the main figures that is going to attend this gathering. I think is one of the most mature presidents, for saying that in some way, is one of the most mature presidents to attend this gathering. And if you think about it, this is going to have Lula heading the gathering. Lula is in his third term. Lula is also a very experienced, very experienced, has many expertise leading his country. And Lula is coming from a moment in Latin America where he shared this type of gatherings and shared politics with really, really progressive leaders that now are absent. He's coming from another generation, the generation of Fidel Castro in Cuba, the generation of Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías in Venezuela. And he's coming from the moment in history that saw the creation of the ALBA, the creation of other international cooperation mechanisms, and also the creation of common funds, the common grounds to enhance regional politics and regional cooperation. Lula is coming from that moment. And for me, it's not a surprise that Lula is trying to replicate, is trying to mirror, now with a new reality, those mechanisms and those ideas and those ways they had. Latin America was standing strong back then. Latin America was in an economic uprising back then and in a fraternal uprising in that moment. Now Latin America faces political diversity, faces more attacks, but also faces a new reality. And now we have one of the most experimented, most mature presidents, that is to say, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, having a gathering with a middle range of presidents that have other ideas, that have other ideas, and not only that, maybe other intentions. And there is the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros. There is presidents like Mario Abdo Benítez, like the representative of Peru, Alberto Darola. Those are different ideals, different ideologies, different people, different nations, different ways. And they have also young presidents like Gabriel Boric. As I was saying, he's under 40 years old. So he sees this with a new perspective, with a fresh perspective. And we have this gathering that has all the poles, all the ages, all the ideals of Latin America converging in one point. Now, as we see, we have other head of state arriving at the Planalto Palace. Every president is coming with an entourage and is received with high honors by the guard of the Planalto Palace, the military command that is receiving every president and every representative that is attending this summit. In just seconds, we are going to clarify and explain which head of state is arriving, but is to say that we are expecting other, and we just saw coming in and the presidents of Chile, of Paraguay, and also the president of Venezuela. And now we see one of the main figures, also one of the main attendees, the main guests to this gathering, Luis Arce Catacora, the president of Bolivia, one of the presidents that has sustained, that has remained in power despite many attacks. And he's coming from the movement towards Socialism Party. That's the party founded and in power thanks to other Latin American leader, Evo Morales Ayma, one of the indigenous leaders that also came from a background of progressive ideals and for more human policies. And Luis Arce Catacora is attending this gathering, and this is one of the main guests, and I'm going to tell you why. First, this is an experienced leader, not only as a president, also as an indigenous leader. He has sustained and he has enhanced the presence of his people, the Aymara people, in his country. He faced the pandemic, he faced the demise and the removal from office of Evo Morales Ayma in 2019. He saw the coming back of Evo Morales to his country, and he has the heritage of that leadership. He has the path paved because of Evo Morales, but he has done the things on his way. Okay, and now Bolivia had discovered these lithium reserves, these lithium enormous resources that Bolivia has, and shares with Chile and shares with Argentina. And let's recall, lithium is one of the main resources right now. It's called the white gold because of its use in technologies, because of its use in batteries, because many of the worldwide technologies and industries need lithium to function. So this is one of the countries that comes to the gathering with a prosperous economy. Bolivia is the country with the highest economic growth in the last year. Let's recall, that data is coming amidst a big recession for the region and a big recession for the world, but Bolivia grew in this time. The GDP of Bolivia came up in this time, and those are great numbers, those are great data that shows the policies of one president and one party, okay? Luis Arce Catacora and the movement towards socialism. In this case, Luis Arce Catacora is also one of the presidents that maybe in his times as a leader saw this mechanism of integration, saw the creation of ALBA, the Bolivarian Alternative for the Peoples of Our America, and he shared his time with Evo Morales in power, okay? Evo Morales bringing Bolivia forward to these mechanisms together or alongside Lula in that time, alongside Fidel Castro, and alongside the government of Venezuela led by Hugo Chavez. And in this case, I think this is one of the presidents that is going to bring in his expertise, but is going to be open also to new ideas and to new ways to do things in Latin America.
Dentro de pocos minutos entre los presidentes y jefes de Estado y de gobierno de los pueblos de América del Sur. Todos los detalles, por supuesto, se le estaremos dando a través de nuestras pantallas. Por el momento despedimos este avance.
Ya regresa Buena Vibra.
And also, we continue to expect the arrival of these heads of state and these presidents of the region of South American nations, the representatives of South American nations, that is going to attend this gathering convoked and called and summoned by the president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. Let's recall, already arrived the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, the president of Bolivia, Luis Arce Catacora, the president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, and also the president of Guyana, Imran Ali. So there are other presidents, there are other heads of state that are expected to arrive in the course of the day, in the course of the morning, that is going to attend this gathering. Let's recall, maybe in this case, they are going to discuss other regions, but the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, arrived first, okay? Arrived earlier and had a private meeting yesterday with the president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. That meeting, I think, not only sets the ideas of what is going to be the future of the relationships between both nations, between Venezuela and Brazil. That meeting also marks and sets the tone for this gathering, okay? It's going to be a gathering not just to maybe catch up regarding politics. It's also be a way to discuss how amongst the differences, how amongst different models of economy and models of ideology, those nations, these 12 nations, are going to get in accordance, are going to get in an agreement to move forward and to face global challenges, to face what is to come. What is to come. And as we know, we can't recall what's happened, okay? What happened, the global recession, happened the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is the aftermath of those big events, those major events that turned upside down the economies and the ways of living of these nations and the world in general. So maybe this is going to be the first of other gatherings, of other reunions, of other discussions regarding regional politics, regional economies, and the ways to enhance the regional richness. We are also expecting other heads of state. We are expecting other representatives of South American nations to come and attend this gathering called by the President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva.
¿Sabías que el pepino también tiene propiedades medicinales? Pues hoy hablaremos de él, de sus beneficios y propiedades. Es tan bueno que regenera la piel dañada. Aplicado en rodajas sobre nuestros ojos, nos refresca evitando irritaciones. Protege nuestras células contra el cáncer. Regenera el metabolismo. Aporta minerales a la sangre. Regula la presión arterial y los latidos del corazón. Su consumo en ensaladas y en jugos nos ayuda a tener una buena salud. Nos vemos en una próxima edición de Los Rebeldes.
And we were watching live the attendance, or maybe the arrival of several heads of state to this South American heads of state gathering, called by the President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, and convened in the Planalto Palace in Brasilia, the seat of the Brazilian government in the South American nation. We will have more details in upcoming news briefs. Stay with us, please, because we will have this meeting and other details. Stay with us.